Puppets. Sorry if I'm not as energetic as usual. I am feeling a little under the weather, but that just means I had extra time to sit around and do what I do best, which is watch cartoons and talk about them on the internet. On with the review. Today I will be reviewing Over the Garden Wall. Now, I literally watched the entire show this morning, and I had no prior knowledge before I dove into that. So I thought it would be nice to give you guys my legitimate first impression. As I go back and inevitably watch the show straight through a couple more times, I may even decide to post another review just to talk about the things I didn't really pick up on the first time. If I pick up on enough things, I might go back and make another review to analyze those things that I didn't pick up on before. But for now, here is my first impression of Over the Garden Wall. I loved it! Seriously, I texted my mom and told her how good it was while I was watching it. About 2 episodes in, I made the conscious decision to look for things that I disliked or disapproved of. However, I kept getting distracted by the intriguing plot line that was being presented to me. Another conscious decision I made was to not talk too much about the plot line in this review, because it's really something you have to experience. Also, pretty much anything I would say would be a spoiler. So, without getting too in-depth, here's an overview. Stepbrothers Wirt and Greg find themselves in a dark and mysterious forest. Despite Greg's absent-minded, silly behavior, Wirt comes to realize that they are more lost than he is comfortable with. A few episodes later, you find out how they got lost and why they're in the woods. But for now, all you know is that these 2 boys are lost in the woods and they're trying to get home. The plot greatly thickens. But even then, the overall goal is for the 2 boys to eventually find their way back home. Over the Garden Wall premiered on November 3rd in 2014, so it's a fairly new show. There are only 10 episodes, each of them only being 11 minutes long. In that short amount of time, they tell an amazing story that will just blow your mind. The boys go so many places and do so many things, and so many plot elements are introduced that it's really hard to believe that you've only been watching 10 11-minute episodes. The characters, while seeming a bit run-of-the-mill in the beginning, actually go through intense development through such a short span of time. It's a lot more obvious with the younger brother, Greg. He starts out as a typical optimistic child with a big imagination and a free spirit. Not to say he doesn't end up that way too, but there's a really important moment in the show where he does something really heroic for his older brother. This moment is very touching, and it's also a really vital plot point. In terms of humor, I think Greg is widely accepted as the funniest character in the show. But his development was obvious. A more subtle development was had by Greg's brother Wirt, who is presented as a more serious and slightly nervous main character. While Greg runs around without a care in the world, Wirt sees himself as the one who keeps everything together. However, he does not have as strong a grip on reality as he seems to think. He's repeatedly seen staring wistfully up at the sky and reciting poetry that he wrote himself. Something interesting about Wirt is that he routinely blames Greg for things going wrong, even when Greg may have had nothing to do with it at all. Watching him do this does not even register as wrong to the viewers, though, because you see Wirt as the serious one, and Greg as the silly, absent-minded, accident-prone one. So when Wirt says that something is Greg's fault, we just kind of take his word for it instead of actually examining the situation. After Greg is repeatedly blamed for situations that have nothing to do with him, the pair of boys meet a woodsman. He observes Wirt's behavior towards his brother and basically just tells him that he's being stupid. This is when I realized that even though it really seemed like Wirt had everything together and he was in charge and the leader and stuff, he was actually a really irresponsible leader, cleverly tricking the audience into believing that he was the smart one. Slowly, Wirt begins to mature throughout the show. By the end, he takes responsibility for his actions, saves the day, and becomes a very strong mentor for his brother. The boys are also accompanied by a talking bluebird named Beatrice. She later reveals that she's actually not a bluebird, and that she was actually cursed by a bluebird because she threw a rock at it. The bird also cursed her entire family, turning them all into bluebirds, and she vowed not to return home until she can turn them all human again. Next on the list would be animation. The animation and color scheme was actually the first thing I noticed about Over the Garden Wall. It has the same animation as any Cartoon Network show you may come across, but it lacks the same splash of color that most of them have. It's all very dark and gray and brown, but it's about two children lost in a creepy forest, so what would you expect? And speaking of the word creepy, this show is really creepy. It starts out with an overall creepy vibe that just kind of makes you uneasy, but as the plot thickens, actual creepy stuff starts happening. As a young child, I probably would have steered clear of this whole show. But at this point in my life, the creepier it got, the more it just drew me in. It got visually and thematically very disturbing, but in my opinion it didn't really cross the line. Unless you were thinking about showing it to a younger child, which I just really wouldn't recommend. And lastly, the show was really funny. While most Cartoon Network shows are a roller coaster of face palms and big laughs, Over the Garden Wall had a steady stream of effective humor without skipping a beat. I don't recall any crude humor, but of course that doesn't mean it wasn't in there. But it was not a show that heavily depended on crude humor to score a few cheap laughs. Not to say the humor was especially sophisticated, but it was smart enough that I didn't feel guilty for laughing at it. And what more can you ask for? There's honestly not a lot to say. There's honestly not a lot to say about Over the Garden Wall. Like I said before, it's possible that I'll come out with another review to cover any ground that I may have missed in this one. Once I've had time to process the whole thing, there might be another video about this show. But for now, my feeling towards it are pretty simple. Which brings me to a rating. I know I'm about to have done this twice, but I'm going to have to be honest with you guys and say 10 out of 10. And I honestly believe it deserves that. In my last review, I talked about Teen Titans Go. I gave that a 10 out of 10, not because I liked it more than the other shows that I gave a lower rating, but because I couldn't find any obvious flaws.
Have you heard about that new Teen Titans Go cartoon?
Oh yeah,
It's the worst.
a 10 out of 10.
Unbelievable.
But Over the Garden Wall is receiving this rating from me because I honestly just liked it that much. I searched high and low to find a reason to take points off, but it's just too good. I highly recommend it for all ages. But I recommend parental guidance for the little ones. It is TV PG because there are some elements that could be disturbing for young children. But if you're my age, a little younger, or an adult, I would urge you to give Over the Garden Wall a try. I highly doubt you will regret it. If you like what I have to say, please leave me a comment down below. If you don't like what I have to say, then also feel free to leave a comment. Let me know how you feel. If you have any suggestions for something else I could review, please let me know down below or send the Sentient Sock Puppets a Twitter message. You can also find us on Facebook, so feel free to find us on there and give us a like. All videos posted by the Sentient Sock Puppets can be found on our Facebook account and our Twitter account. Check out Josh and David for video games and movie reviews. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.